I represent the device world, and I do work at the FDA Center for Devices. The really interesting thing is, for people like myself, and I am a cardiologist by background, prior to coming to the FDA, I would say about 50% of the time I was working with devices when treating patients. For someone like Dr. Wang, who is the chief of cardiac electrophysiology at Stanford, he might say the percentage is 80% or even higher. Now, the device rules are a bit different from the drug rules, and I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining some of the differences because it is important to address this topic and enlarge the topic. We've heard two excellent talks this morning, but we kept hearing the word drug. I like drugs, but I also like devices. So I will give a brief background on how the FDA views device regulation. It's also important that when I'm coming out here, I am primarily representing the device center. The drugs people like to have their own reps, but I'll make a few comments about drugs because most of the comments are generalizable. Okay, but the first point is that Congress recognized around 1976 that devices are not drugs and needed a separate regulatory path, and that's why we have the FDA Center for Devices and we have the FDA Center for Drugs, and there are different regulations. The primary reason why this is the case is that for device iteration, there are definite differences than with drug development. For example, the rate of technology change is much more rapid in device development. You can think of devices like your iPhone. After we get our first device approved, whether it's a coronary stent or an EP catheter, the company is usually very interactive with physicians and engineers, and they're already working on the second and third generation devices to continue to improve the device and to miniaturize the device. The second major point is that there's a definite influence of physician technique on results. You can have a wonderful device, but some of them can be very difficult to use, and you can have a less than desirable patient result. And so operator training and understanding of how to use a device is critical. Now, similar to the FDA Center for Drugs, Congress has mandated that the Center for Devices needs to get safe and effective devices to patients as quickly as possible, but yet in the post-market arena needs to ensure that these approved devices remain safe and effective in a more generalizable real-world environment. Finally, and this is very important in this day and age, a key responsibility of the FDA is to make sure that patients get accurate data in an open and transparent fashion. So there's a wide range of devices out there. We regulate everything from very simple surgical gloves, where we're primarily interested in making sure that the gloves, when they come from a manufacturer, do not have any holes in them and are sterile, to very complicated cardiovascular devices as shown on this slide. And so we have a risk-based system for regulation, and the most risky devices, the ones used for chronic implantation like heart valves or pacemakers, have the highest degree of regulation, and basically the regulatory route is very similar to drug development. And it's called as shown on the prior slide, it's called the PMA, or pre-market approval pathway. Now, with that introduction to the FDA Center for Devices, let's examine where we are right now. And certainly, Dr. Lewis's introductory comments were very pertinent. And unfortunately, we haven't progressed as far as we would like. And this is just a section from a recent paper by Ortega et al. And certainly, I think the FDA would agree that there's a big problem here. And I think the whole audience would agree. So, Dr. Bierer gave us a wonderful presentation, and she talked about the FDA analysis of drug trials. And I think a key point that she made was that when you're dealing with the government, first of all, don't be afraid to interact with the government. And secondly, question what the government points out. And she identified some problems with our statistics. But even if there are problems, I think on this slide and the next slide, in the current environment, FDA Center for Drugs has identified important real-world problems in terms of our knowledge base regarding cardiovascular drugs and drugs used in other medical specialties. So the problem at FDA is seen across the board with respect to both devices and drugs. So if we're on the left side of the screen where everyone can't see the baseball game, how do we get to the right side of the screen, at least it's my right, where we can move towards a more equitable and just system? Especially baseball is the sport that I enjoy the best, and it also applies to why we're here today. Now, from the FDA perspective, there's been a decade-long history of trying to address the problems that we've been talking about today and will continue to talk about. The Office of Minority Health and Health Equity was established in 2010, and subsequently there have been important FDA guidance documents that have been issued, and also there have been key meetings sponsored by the Food and Drug Administration. I'd like to point out also that Dr. Bierer had a nice slide indicating the recent 2022 guidance document that more specifically addresses the real-world problems that we're talking about today. Certainly, Dr. Califf, our present FDA commissioner, is very supportive of efforts in this area. And as Dr. Bierer indicated, this is an extremely important guidance document, but it should be seen as a helpful document with all the other resources that we can bring to bear on these important issues. And certainly the MRCT has a lot to offer here, as we just heard. But the diversity plans to improve enrollment of participants from underrepresented racial and ethnic populations in clinical trials has an important role to play. First of all, it's a FDA government document. Number two, as Dr. Bierer pointed out, it really emphasizes the need for planning upfront rather than post hoc. and I think it covers the general areas that are important to consider, but it doesn't have the granularity of, say, the work that Dr. Behrer and her group are doing, and that's why there's a compendium of resources that should be considered. Now, with the FDA guidance document, one might question, why do we still have a problem? The U.S. government firmly supports an increased emphasis on diversity, inclusion, and equity. Well, one of the reasons is that FDA guidance documents do not establish legally enforceable responsibilities. They're put out there to encourage the community and industry to utilize the best science, but the FDA can't say your product won't be approved if you haven't established these important objectives laid out in the guidance. And this is the language that's used in any FDA guidance document. And consequently, in order to perform a human device trial in the United States for an unapproved experimental device, you need to have what's called Investigator Device Exemption Approval, or IDE approval. And this is the standard language that is put in a FDA IDE approval letter that allows one to start a human device trial in the United States. And again, there's the language that says encourages, but does not stipulate that says it must be done. Now, fortunately, the current Biden administration is very interested in moving the ball forward. And at the end of 2022, there was a very important legislative bill passed, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. And frankly, this bill is going to give FDA increased legal authority to do important work in this area. Specifically, sponsors upfront, whether they're drug sponsors or device sponsors, will be required to work with FDA on a diversity action plan, prospectively, rather than post hoc. And there are other components of this important bill that I'm going to speak about in the next few slides. Specifically, these are the main components of the Diversity and Modernization Act Diversity Action Plan. Again, a prospectively developed plan. There will be a public workshop to also hear from important stakeholders before the plan is enacted. And importantly, FDA will be required to report to Congress on how FDA and other key stakeholders are doing in this area within 2 years after enactment. So this is a very positive development. Now, what I was just talking about was the general FDA requirements, and then each center within FDA, and there are 7 centers within FDA, including the Center for Drugs, the Center for Biologics, Center for Devices. Don't ask me to tell you what the other 4 centers are. I'm getting old. But anyways, at the Center for Devices, certainly our strategic priorities align with the more general FDA strategic priorities, and you can see that over the next 3 to 5 years, diversity, inclusivity, and equity will be a key component of the Center for Devices strategic plan. Again, even with the recent legislative passage, FDA is really going to need to work closely with all stakeholders to try to make a better reality here. And in addition to the stakeholders in this audience, it's going to be really important to hear from patients to make sure that we can get to where we need to be. These are our measures of success that the Center for Devices will be utilizing by 2025. So we have a lot of work to do, and we look forward to working with you all. Now, again, I'm going to underline this theme that it really does take a village to make real progress in this area, and that's why it's very heartwarming to see that we have a very committed audience here today. And I'm sure that working together, we can move the ball forward. Now, I think also we've heard in the first 2 talks about important things that can be done to move the ball forward, and that's increased engagement with the community, design of better trials that are user-friendly and efficient, and many other activities. I'd like to posit 2 other things that we really need to talk about in a real-world fashion. And I'm going to use a recent example that I think is very pertinent to this discussion. 2 weeks ago, the Cardiovascular Device Center had a cardiovascular panel where we discussed in open session the 2 renal denervation devices that are up for possible US approval. As you all know, hypertension is a major public health problem in the United States and the world. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, many patients are inadequately treated with drugs for many reasons, including the fact that many patients don't want to take 2 or 3 drugs, etc. It was, well, let me preface my comments by saying that anything that I subsequently state should not be construed as indicating whether FDA is going to approve or disapprove these 2 devices. But the panel was very interesting in the following sense. One of the manufacturers, Medtronic, has a device where they did a worldwide clinical trial, and approximately 50% of the patients were from outside the US. Unfortunately, with current regulations, we were not able to obtain the information on race or ethnicity for these outside U.S. patients. This becomes a problem because, as many of you are aware, specific device performance with regards to hypertension in African Americans and Latinos would be of extreme interest, given that there are questions about how drugs work in these two particular populations. Certainly, the agency uses a philosophy where if a product is approved and there's a lot of uncertainty about how that particular product might work in specific subgroups, especially with so-called breakthrough devices, which these particular devices are, there's a fair amount of latitude for finding out additional information through post-market studies. But it really does illuminate a basic problem. We have to make U.S. clinical sites more competitive such that we can really focus on increasing enrollment in the United States. This is a particular problem in the device world and also in the drug world. And certainly one of my ulterior motives for being out here is to talk with Doctors Wong and Lewis about increasing competitiveness of US-based hospital systems, specifically in the early feasibility studies and other ventures that FDA is working on currently to try to reverse problems like the one I just mentioned. The second issue that I'd like to bring up, which may be helpful, is that I do think there needs to be increased emphasis on looking at successes and failures with diversity, inclusion, and equity in journal manuscripts. I think JACC Heart Failure has taken a very exemplary role here, and it would be really important to perhaps motivate other journals to more specifically have in their discussion sections important comments on how studies succeeded in this area or didn't succeed, and whether additional work needs to be done such that we really continue to raise the level of awareness. So in summary, FDA is aware of this very important problem. We have a lot of work to do. The agency is very committed to working with all relevant stakeholder groups, including the industry, because the ball really needs to move forward. Thank you for allowing me to give this talk, and certainly I am very interested in promoting device development, as you say. Thank you all.